Hi, it is Jane, and on Healthier You today, we are going to discuss some ways to fight emotional eating. Do any of you do that? I know I do. Have all my life. First, the medical disclaimer. Always check with your physician before starting any exercise program or diet regimen. Information here is my personal research into different health topics, not to be considered medical advice. Okay, let's get into it. These come from a dietitian, and the way that this dietitian put it is, this is a no-nonsense guide to fighting emotional eating. We're all guilty of eating our feelings now and then. When emotions run high, we turn to food for comfort. Well, some of us do. I do. That's because eating is inherently satisfying behavior. In fact, it needs to be. We rely on food to survive, after all. Searching for ways to cope with stress is natural too, by the way. However, we also know that this tendency to cope via stress eating, emotional eating, whatever you want to call it, isn't exactly healthy, physically or mentally. One of the issues with emotional eating is that it affects, of course, how you feel physically. Overeating can reduce your energy level, cause headaches, just generally come with some discomfort. And this comes from Casey Kilpatrick, a dietitian at Houston Methodist. The other issue is that, as far as resolving uncomfortable emotions go, eating really doesn't work. And while there are plenty of eating-related tips and tricks out there to help combat emotional eating, Kilpatrick says there's a reason these restrictive food rules do not work for everyone. She also recommends a more productive approach to addressing emotional eating, and her method actually almost has nothing to do with food. That's interesting. Even after learning and committing these food rules to memory, such as limiting ourselves to 2 snacks per day or not eating past 7 p.m., many of us still find ourselves struggling with emotional eating. To actually resolve this behavior, we need to first remove the stigma around it, and then we need to use a more productive way to address it. Why restrictive food rules don't always solve emotional eating. She says there are 2 main reasons addressing emotional eating with restrictive food rules that just don't work for people. It assumes your behavior is due to a lack of self-control, and you're using food as a solution to fight an emotional problem. If I asked you all about the areas of your life where you successfully exhibit self-control, you'd likely have quite a list going on by the time you were done. The reality is that most of the time, emotional eating has nothing to do with a lack of self-control. And this is where your support persons can come in play. You need them to remind you. It's not about self-control. In fact, you probably have plenty of it. And since food rules are all about encouraging self-control, it's not surprising they don't always solve emotional eating in the long run. Unless you target, and when it comes back to emotional eating, the habit of eating usually isn't the problem either. Remember, eating is human nature. Wanting comfort food is human nature. Boy, is it. Instead, the real issue is the uncomfortable emotion you're feeling that causes you to turn to food as a coping mechanism. Unless you've targeted the underlying emotion that causes you to eat in a way that's productive and actually addresses the emotion itself, you're more likely to continue to find yourself struggling to overcome emotional eating. Instead, use this two-step method to overcome emotional eating. Processing emotions is hard work, especially during particularly stressful time or when you don't have access to your usual coping mechanisms. As a result, you may turn to food to help you cope with your emotions. I turn to food, I turn to crochet, I turn to knitting, sewing. But sometimes the knitting, crocheting, sewing isn't satisfying enough, and I find myself ruminating and turning to food. So I need to find something in the meantime that will help me not turn to food. In terms of trying to deal with emotions, there's actually a lot worse ways to cope than eating. However, that doesn't make emotional eating productive or healthy for that matter, so it's important to address it. There is a two-step method she uses to overcome emotional eating. 1. Recognize the behavior without self-judgment. Let me say that again. Recognize the behavior without self-judgment. And we can be our own worst critics. The first step is to effectively address emotional eating is simply recognize that you're doing it. By recognizing that the only reason you're eating right now is because of an uncomfortable emotion you're feeling, you're already one step closer to overcoming it. If you have the emotional capacity, you can make this a bigger step forward by taking a moment to write down a word or sentence that describes what you are feeling. Use that food diary. This step may sound simple, almost too simple, but to be truly successful, you need to accept the behavior without passing judgment on yourself. This is where the hard work comes in. Judgment isn't serving us here. In fact, it makes things worse. Self-judgment is accompanied by shame and guilt, strong emotions that further add on to your load and make it even harder to properly process what you're feeling. As you take the step to recognize and acknowledge that you are emotionally eating, she recommends reminding yourself, I am a human going through something very stressful, and I am dealing with it in a very human way. Again, I am a human going through something very stressful, and I'm dealing with it in a very human way. Now, step 2. Find an emotional solution to your emotional problem. In order to move beyond the stress eating or emotional eating, you need to both feel your emotion and find a productive solution to resolve it. Once you've made it through step 1, it's time to choose a better coping mechanism than food. 1. Accepting and addressing uncomfortable emotions is hard. If you're feeling overwhelmed and need to save step 2 for later, that's okay. But ultimately, the goal is to identify a more productive way to handle what you're feeling. What's the right solution to your emotional problem? Well, that depends both on you as a person as well as the particular emotion you're struggling with. Here are Kilpatrick's recommendations for coping with common emotions. Stress, breathing exercises, meditating or finding a quiet place to take a walk. Loneliness, text, call, video chat with a friend or a loved one. Sadness, make a list of the things you're grateful for or laugh along with some comedy. Boredom, finish a project, watch a movie, or read a book. Anxiety, confide in a friend, spend time with your pets, or consider reaching out to a counselor or even a therapist. Replacing food with one or more productive solutions above is really the only way to overcome emotional eating long term. And one last thing, while saying these 2 steps is easy, following through with them is hard work that may take some time. If it feels you're taking 1 step forward one day and then 2 back the next, that's okay. Be patient and lenient with yourself. Changing your mindset towards, don't know what it is, with a voice, towards addressing emotional eating is a process. Changing your mindset towards addressing emotional eating is a process, but it's worth it. How mood, food, weight loss cycles work. This is something that can help you. Emotional eating is used as a way to suppress, soothe negative emotions such as stress, anger, boredom, sadness, and loneliness. Major life events, or more commonly the hassles of daily life, can trigger negative emotions that lead to emotional eating and disrupt your weight loss efforts. Triggers might include relationship conflicts, work or other stressors, fatigue, financial problems, health problems. Although some people eat less in the face of strong emotions, if you are in emotional distress, you might turn to impulsive or binge eating, quickly consuming whatever's convenient without enjoyment. In fact, your emotions can become so tied to your eating habits that you automatically reach for a treat whenever you're angry or stressed without thinking about what you're doing. Food also serves as a distraction. If you're worried about an upcoming event or stewing over a conflict, you may focus on eating comfort food instead of dealing with the painful situation. Whatever emotions drive you to overeat, the end result is often the same. The effect is temporary, the emotions return, and you're likely then to bear additional burden of guilt about setting back your weight loss goals. This can also lead to an unhealthy cycle. Your emotions trigger you to overeat. You beat yourself up for getting off your weight loss track. You feel bad and you overeat again. So how can you get back on track? When negative emotions threaten to trigger emotional eating, you can take a few steps to control cravings. And some of those are: keep a food diary. Write down what you eat, how much you eat, when you eat, how you're feeling when you eat, and how hungry you are. Over time, you might see patterns that reveal the connection between mood and food. Tame your stress. If stress contributes to your emotional eating, try a stress management technique, such as yoga, meditation, or deep breathing. Have a hunger reality check. Is your hunger physical or emotional? If you ate just a few hours ago and don't have a rumbling stomach, you're probably not hungry. Give the craving time to pass. Get support. You're more likely to give in to the emotional of eating if you lack a good support network. Told you, support's important. Lean on family and friends and consider joining a support group. Fight boredom. Instead of snacking when you're not hungry, distract yourself, substitute a healthier behavior. Take a walk, watch a movie, play with your cat, listen to music, read, surf the internet, call a friend. Take away temptation. Don't keep hard to resist comfort foods in your home. And if you feel angry or blue, postpone your trip to the grocery store until you have your emotions in check. Don't deprive yourself. When trying to lose weight, you might limit calories too much. Eat the same foods repeatedly and banish treats. This may just serve to increase your food cravings, especially in response to emotions. Eat satisfying amounts of healthier foods. Enjoy an occasional treat and get plenty of variety to help curb those emotions, or help curb the cravings. Snack healthy. Choose healthier snacks such as fruit, vegetables with a low-fat dip, nuts, or unbuttered popcorn. Or try lower-calorie versions of your favorite foods to see if they satisfy your craving. Learn from your setbacks. If you have an episode of emotional eating, forgive yourself and start fresh the next day. Try to learn from the experience and make a plan for how you can prevent this in the future. Focus on the positive changes you are making in your eating habits and your lifestyle, and give yourself credit for making those changes that lead to better health. When to seek professional help. If you tried self-help options but you still can't control emotional eating, consider therapy with a mental health professional. Therapy can help you understand why you eat emotionally and help you learn some coping skills. Therapy can also help you discover whether you actually have an eating disorder, which can be connected to emotional eating. And that is it. I hope that these tips help you, encourage you, give you a few ideas if you are an emotional eater on how to combat those things. And remember, be a little kinder to yourself. All right, guys, that is it for today. I will see you again soon. Everybody have a great week. And remember, love one another, be kinder to yourself, and see this big, beautiful world we're living. Take a walk. All right? See you guys soon. Bye.